There comes a moment in every life when the noise fades, the crowd disappears, and you're left standing alone. No support, no applause, just silence, and the sound of your own heartbeat reminding you it's time to rebuild. Most people fear that silence, but the wise, they use it. Because solitude isn't punishment, it's the beginning of power. When no one believes in you, you learn to believe in yourself. When no one shows up, you learn to move without waiting. That's where strength is born, not in comfort, but in the quiet moments when you have nothing to rely on except your will. You see, pain doesn't destroy you, it sculpts you. Every heartbreak, every disappointment, every lonely night is shaping the version of you that doesn't beg to be seen because they know their worth. Rebuilding alone is not a tragedy, it's transformation. This is where you stop chasing validation and start mastering solitude, where you learn that isolation was never meant to break you, it was meant to introduce you to your power. Because when you have no one, you build yourself stronger, and that's exactly what this audiobook will teach you to do. Chapter 1. The Power Hidden in Isolation. Isolation is the crucible where identity is reforged. It's where the illusions of belonging and approval burn away, leaving only the raw truth of who you really are. At first it feels like exile, like the world has forgotten you. But soon you realize it's not abandonment, it's alignment. Life pulled you away from the noise so you could finally hear yourself. Solitude isn't emptiness, it's clarity. When you're surrounded by people, it's easy to confuse their voices with your own. You inherit opinions, absorb expectations, and mistake conformity for connection. But when silence settles, you begin to distinguish your true thoughts from the borrowed ones. Isolation is the detox of the soul. It purges the false so authenticity can breathe. Most people never find themselves because they never stop performing. They fill their days with noise, conversation, validation, anything to avoid hearing their own truth. But isolation exposes you. It holds a mirror to your fears, insecurities, and unrealized strength. It's painful, yes, but pain is only the sound of weakness leaving your system. The power in isolation lies in awareness. When everything external fades, you start to meet the internal, your habits, your impulses, your thoughts. You begin to see patterns that kept you trapped for years. You notice how often you sabotage your own growth, how often you shrink to stay accepted. Awareness is the first step toward liberation. In isolation, distractions die. And when distractions die, direction is born. You stop wasting energy trying to fit in and start investing energy into building up. The silence becomes sacred, not because it's peaceful, but because it's productive. Every quiet hour becomes a forge where focus is molded. At first, isolation will test you. You'll crave conversation, company, noise, anything to fill the void. But if you sit long enough, the void starts speaking. It tells you what you've been avoiding. It reveals what you truly need to change. You realize loneliness isn't the absence of people. It's the absence of self-awareness. When you learn to be alone without collapsing, you become unshakable. The world loses its power to manipulate you because you no longer depend on it for validation. You can walk away from anything because you no longer fear being left with yourself. That's not loneliness, that's liberation. Isolation strips you of distraction, but gifts you direction. It teaches you self-reliance, self-respect, and self-restraint. The weak see isolation as punishment. The wise see it as practice. Every quiet season prepares you for louder victories. You don't discover strength in crowds, you develop it in solitude. The person you are in silence is your true reflection. If that version feels uncomfortable, that's where the work begins. Build the kind of inner world you'd never want to escape from. Power is built privately. The world sees success as public, applause, followers, admiration. But all greatness begins in the dark, in the hours no one witnesses. Isolation is where preparation hides until destiny calls it forward. Solitude sharpens self-control. When no one is watching, discipline becomes authentic. You're no longer motivated by image, only by integrity. Doing the right thing in silence is the foundation of power that cannot be shaken in noise. Isolation teaches detachment. When you spend time alone, you stop chasing what doesn't align. You no longer cling to toxic people or temporary pleasures. You start choosing what feeds your evolution, not your ego. When you stop seeking external reassurance, you develop internal reassurance. Confidence becomes quiet. You stop needing to announce your growth. It speaks through your energy, your peace, your precision. Most people are terrified of being alone because silence reveals the truth. They don't know who they are without distraction. But facing that truth is the doorway to transformation. You can't rebuild until you confront the foundation. Isolation is your workshop. Every moment you spend in solitude is an investment in your future power. The peace you build now becomes your weapon when life gets loud again. Solitude is the training ground for emotional independence. You'll realize that isolation doesn't isolate you. It refines you. It filters out superficiality. It exposes fake friendships, shallow desires, and weak intentions. It leaves you with only what matters, purpose and presence. Once you learn to be your own companion, you stop fearing loss. No person, no group, no approval can destabilize you because your roots are internal. Dependency dies where solitude begins. Isolation transforms silence into strength and solitude into strategy. You stop reacting to life and start designing it. The mind becomes clear, the heart becomes steady, and purpose becomes obvious. The greatest leaders, creators, and thinkers all walked through isolation, not because they wanted to escape the world, but because they wanted to understand it from the outside. Perspective is born in distance. And when you emerge from that solitude, you don't come back the same. You come back grounded, aware, and dangerous. Because now, your peace is no longer conditional. You've learned that the most powerful version of yourself was waiting all along, in the quiet. Chapter 2. Silence is where strength begins. Silence is not weakness. It's the discipline of control. It's the art of listening before speaking, of understanding before reacting. Most people are terrified of silence because it confronts them with themselves. But silence is where strength begins, because in silence you stop performing and start perceiving. You learn that power doesn't need to announce itself, it simply exists. The world rewards noise. Everyone wants to be heard, seen, validated, but the loudest are rarely the strongest. They're often the most insecure. True strength moves quietly because it doesn't need approval to confirm its worth. Silence is the posture of the powerful, calm, grounded, untouchable. In silence, your thoughts reveal their true nature. You begin to notice how much noise existed inside your own mind. The worries, the comparisons, the endless inner dialogue. The more you sit in silence, the more you separate signal from static. That's how you find focus, not by adding more, but by removing what doesn't matter. When you stop talking, you start noticing. You see what people hide behind words. You hear what they don't say. You recognize patterns, motives, and energy. Silence isn't absence. It's awareness amplified. It sharpens your perception like a blade. Strength begins the moment you stop defending yourself to others. Silence teaches you that not every attack deserves a reaction, not every opinion deserves a response. The more you explain, the more power you give away. The wise stay silent, not because they're afraid, but because they've learned that truth doesn't need defense. Silence builds emotional stamina. It forces you to process pain instead of projecting it. It teaches you to sit with discomfort, to understand it, to learn from it. The weak seek distraction from pain. The strong turn it into discipline. Every quiet moment you endure without escape adds another layer to your armor. In silence, ego dies. You realize how much of your speech was performance, an effort to prove, defend, or impress. When you stop seeking to be understood, you start understanding yourself. Strength isn't the ability to outtalk others. It's the ability to outgrow the need to. Silence is self-respect. It's refusing to lower your energy to match chaos. It's staying composed when provoked, centered when challenged. People mistake your calm for weakness until they realize nothing can shake you. That's when silence becomes intimidating, not because it hides fear, but because it reveals mastery. Every powerful person you admire learned to harness silence. They withdrew not to hide, but to sharpen. In quiet, they refined their thoughts, restructured their vision, and built clarity. When they finally spoke, their words carried weight because they came from stillness, not impulse. The worker fills silence with noise. The leader fills silence with strategy. The world runs on reaction, but transformation runs on reflection. If you can't be still, you can't be strong. Stillness is not the absence of motion, it's motion under control. Silence teaches you timing, when to speak, when to act, when to hold back. Reaction is emotional, response is intentional. The person who can pause under pressure always holds the power. The pause is where strength gathers before it strikes. In silence, you learn to value solitude over approval. You stop needing validation to feel alive. The less you talk, the more you listen. The more you listen, the wiser you become. Wisdom doesn't shout, it observes. The strong never compete for attention. They compete for alignment. They use silence to refine their goals, sharpen their intuition, and master their emotions. When the world gets loud, silence becomes their sanctuary, their mental reset. To embrace silence is to take control of your energy. You stop wasting it on pointless arguments, mindless chatter, or defensive explanations. Every word saved becomes energy preserved, and preserved energy becomes potential power. Silence is the space where breakthroughs happen. When you finally stop talking, the mind stops echoing and starts creating. Every idea, every invention, every moment of revelation in history was born from someone who sat quietly long enough to listen. Strength doesn't come from noise, it comes from knowing. And knowing is born in silence. It's in those quiet hours when no one's watching that you realize what you're capable of. The loud chase validation, the silent chase victory. When you learn to love silence, you start controlling your emotions instead of being controlled by them. The untrained mind fears stillness because it exposes what needs fixing, but the disciplined mind uses it to rebuild. Silence teaches the ultimate lesson. Not everything deserves your energy. The weak argue to be right. The strong remain silent and let truth reveal itself over time. Patience, not noise, is the language of power. You'll know you've matured when you no longer rush to respond, defend, or explain. When silence becomes your natural response to chaos, you've mastered yourself. Because true strength isn't proven through volume, it's proven through composure. And one day, you'll realize that silence never made you smaller. It made you sovereign. It gave you control over your emotions, your time, your energy. You stopped chasing recognition and started radiating presence. That's when you'll understand silence was never empty. It was full of strength, waiting to be heard. Chapter 3. Turning Pain into Personal Growth. Pain is life's most honest teacher. It doesn't flatter, it doesn't comfort, it exposes. Every wound you've carried has something to teach you, but most people run from it before they can learn. Pain isn't your enemy. It's the mirror showing you where your strength is untrained. Growth doesn't come from avoiding discomfort. It comes from understanding it. When you stop resisting pain, you start transforming it. The moment you accept that suffering is part of the process, you gain control. Pain only breaks you when you believe it shouldn't exist. But once you realize it's a sculptor, not a destroyer, every hardship becomes instruction, not punishment. Pain is feedback. It tells you what's weak, what's misaligned, what's no longer serving you. Emotional pain reveals attachment. Physical pain reveals imbalance. Mental pain reveals resistance to change. Every ache is communication, a signal saying something inside you needs attention. We grow faster when we stop asking, "Why me?" and start asking, "What is this trying to teach me?" The world doesn't get easier, you get stronger. Strength isn't built through comfort, it's built through endurance. Every tear, every loss, every disappointment, these are the bricks of your evolution. Growth requires friction. Just as muscles tear to grow, your identity breaks to rebuild. The pain you feel isn't a sign of failure, it's the cost of expansion. The people who rise aren't those who avoid pain, they're the ones who learn how to use it as fuel. Most people treat pain like an intruder when it's actually an instructor. They numb it with distraction, bury it with denial, drown it with busyness. But the lesson stays until it's learned. The moment you face it, you stop reliving it. Avoiding pain prolongs suffering. Embracing it accelerates growth. Pain teaches perspective. It forces you to reevaluate what truly matters. The things you once chased suddenly feel irrelevant. You realize that meaning isn't found in pleasure, but in purpose. Pain strips you of superficiality and brings you back to truth. When you're hurt, you meet parts of yourself that comfort never introduced you to. You discover your patience, your courage, your resilience. Pain introduces you to the version of you that survives, the one built for endurance, not applause. Every great transformation begins with discomfort. Every reinvention starts with a breakdown. It's nature's way of upgrading you, burning away the outdated, the unnecessary, the weak. You're not falling apart, you're being rebuilt. Pain refines your empathy. You stop judging others so quickly because you've been humbled by your own suffering. You understand that everyone's carrying something unseen. That awareness turns your pain into compassion, and compassion into wisdom. When you learn to process pain properly, it becomes power. You no longer react impulsively. You respond intentionally. The fire that once consumed you becomes the same fire that drives you. Pain loses its control when you learn to convert it. Growth through pain requires patience. Healing isn't linear, it's layered. Some days you'll feel progress, others you'll feel collapse. But both are part of recovery. The seed doesn't sprout the day it's buried, but that doesn't mean it's dead. It's developing underground. So are you. Pain has purpose. It sharpens awareness and strengthens will. Without it, you'd never evolve. It teaches you endurance, humility, gratitude. It forces you to slow down, reflect, and realign. When you accept this, pain stops being your prison and becomes your path. Every scar is proof of transformation. You don't hide them, you honor them. They remind you that survival wasn't luck, it was choice. The moments that broke you also built you. You may not see it immediately, but every wound carries wisdom within it. Your relationship with pain defines your future. The weak try to escape it. The strong extract from it. Pain is inevitable, but suffering is optional. The choice lies in whether you resist or reform through it. One keeps you stuck, the other sets you free. The people who rise highest are those who've suffered deepest. Pain becomes the foundation of their perspective. They've walked through darkness and learned how to carry light. When you've rebuilt from nothing, you no longer fear losing anything. Growth requires letting go of the fantasy that life should be painless. Peace doesn't mean absence of pain. It means mastery of response. Once you stop expecting life to be easy, pain loses its ability to shock you. You start walking through fire without burning. Transformation demands accountability. Pain shows you patterns, toxic habits, emotional dependencies, limiting beliefs. You can't heal what you refuse to confront. Growth begins the moment you stop blaming others and start rebuilding yourself. And when you finally rise from your pain, you don't return as the same person. You return quieter, wiser, stronger. The storm that was meant to destroy you ends up defining you. Because once you've turned pain into power, nothing and no one can ever break you again. Chapter 4. Detach from what no longer serves you. Detachment isn't coldness, it's clarity. It's the moment you stop feeding what drains you and start protecting what builds you. Most people suffer not because life is cruel, but because they keep holding on to what's already finished. They cling to people, habits, and identities that expired long ago, mistaking attachment for loyalty. But letting go isn't betrayal, it's evolution. You cannot grow while gripping the past. The version of you that's emerging cannot breathe under the weight of who you used to be. Detachment is the process of choosing peace over familiarity. It's painful at first, like tearing off armor that once kept you safe. But you'll soon realize that what once protected you is now preventing you. We often hold on to pain because it gives us identity. It's easier to replay old stories than to write new ones. But if you keep reliving your wounds, they become your home. Detachment begins when you finally say, "This story no longer defines me." You stop explaining the past and start expanding beyond it. Letting go is not loss. It's space creation. When you release what's not meant for you, life doesn't leave you empty. It makes room for alignment. New opportunities, new energy, new peace cannot enter where chaos still lives. Detachment is not rejection of life. It's an invitation to live fully. Everything you hold on to has energy, and energy either empowers or exhausts. If something constantly drains you, it's not love, it's addiction. Detachment is the detox of the soul. It teaches you to stop mistaking intensity for connection and suffering for loyalty. People fear detachment because they think it means isolation. But detachment doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you stop carrying what isn't yours. You can still love people and walk away. You can still wish them well while protecting your peace. Detachment is compassion with boundaries. To detach, you must first recognize what attachment has cost you. Every sleepless night, every forced conversation, every ignored intuition, all signs that something needed to end. Yet you stayed, hoping it would change. Detachment is the moment you stop negotiating with what keeps you small. The hardest part isn't letting go of others, it's letting go of the version of yourself that tolerated less than you deserved. You must grieve that identity too, the person who accepted chaos, who stayed silent, who begged to be chosen. That version must die for the real you to live. Detachment teaches emotional maturity. You stop reacting to loss like a child and start responding like a creator. You understand that endings aren't punishment, they're promotion. What leaves your life isn't rejection, it's redirection. When you detach, you regain power over your focus. You stop scattering your energy on what drains you. The mind becomes sharper, the heart becomes lighter, and purpose becomes louder. That's the peace you were always chasing in others. The people meant for you will never need you to destroy your peace to keep them. If something requires your constant sacrifice, it's not destiny, it's dependency. Detachment helps you see this truth without bitterness, only awareness. Letting go feels like breaking at first, but it's actually building. Every release strengthens your faith. You learn to trust that what's meant for you will never require begging. Peace doesn't chase, it attracts. When you detach from the noise, you start hearing intuition. The inner voice that was drowned by distraction begins to speak again. It guides you quietly, confidently, away from chaos and toward clarity. That's divine alignment, not coincidence. You'll notice how much time and energy attachment steals, the constant checking, worrying, explaining, all symptoms of fear, not love. Detachment is not indifference, it's the decision to stop suffering over things beyond your control. The old version of you was addicted to control. Detachment frees you from that illusion. You no longer try to manage outcomes or manipulate timing. You let life unfold, trusting that the right things stay effortlessly. What's forced was never meant for you. To detach means to see reality without distortion. You stop romanticizing the past and start analyzing it. You admit what it really was, not what you wanted it to be. That honesty is painful, but it's the beginning of liberation. You can't evolve while defending your limitations. Detachment requires you to surrender the excuses that justify stagnation. You stop saying, "I can't," and start realizing, "I'm choosing not to." Responsibility replaces resentment. Sometimes detachment looks like silence. No dramatic closure, no final confrontation, just distance and peace. You stop explaining yourself because you realize explanation never changed anyone's perception. Only your energy did. Detachment is spiritual discipline. It's the daily practice of staying centered when life tempts you to cling. It's choosing presence over panic, faith over fear. You no longer chase, you align. Once you master detachment, you become dangerous in the best way, unshakable. Nothing external controls your emotions anymore. You love freely, but never desperately. You give fully, but never foolishly. You've learned the difference between holding on and holding yourself. Detachment doesn't mean you stop feeling. It means your feelings stop controlling you. You can still care deeply without losing balance. That's real power. To experience emotion without drowning in it. When you learn to detach, you stop confusing attachment with purpose. You realize some connections were lessons, not lifetimes. Their purpose was to awaken strength, not to stay forever. You thank them and then release them. Your peace is the new standard. Anything that costs it is too expensive. Detachment is simply choosing inner stability over emotional chaos. You stop seeking closure from others because you've already closed the chapter within yourself. Attachment keeps you surviving. Detachment helps you thrive. You stop settling for crumbs because you've remembered your worth. The person who's at peace cannot be manipulated. When you detach, you start flowing with life instead of fighting against it. You stop demanding certainty and start trusting movement. The universe always rewards release with replacement, but only when you're ready to receive. True detachment feels quiet. You no longer need to prove how healed you are. You simply stop engaging with what doesn't match your energy. Silence becomes your strength, not your punishment. Every act of letting go reclaims a piece of your power. You stop living reactively and start living intentionally. Detachment doesn't shrink you, it restores you. At first, detachment feels lonely, but eventually it feels light. You begin to enjoy your own space, your own peace, your own rhythm. The silence that once scared you becomes sacred. Most people never change because they refuse to release. They keep watering dead gardens and calling it effort. Detachment is the courage to stop pretending. You don't fix what's already gone. You build something new. The universe never leaves you empty-handed. Every ending holds a seed of beginning. Detachment is trusting that truth even when your hands feel empty. You let go of control so destiny can take the wheel. Detachment requires faith, not in outcomes, but in your own resilience. You trust that no matter what leaves, you'll rebuild better. You don't fear endings because you've fallen in love with rebirth. Once you detach from the unnecessary, you see life with new eyes. You notice simplicity again, the beauty in small things, the peace in stillness. Detachment doesn't dull your emotions, it sharpens your perception. Peace doesn't come from adding more, it comes from removing what's false. Detachment is subtraction as healing. The less noise, the more clarity. The fewer attachments, the more alignment. You stop trying to convince people to understand your value. You simply become it. Detachment makes you magnetic because calm energy is rare in a world addicted to chaos. Every step of detachment deepens your strength. The less you need, the more powerful you become. You're no longer moved by fear, approval, or loss. You've transcended dependence. That's real freedom. You'll look back one day and realize detachment didn't make you heartless. It made you whole. You didn't lose anything important. You lost what was keeping you limited. The act of letting go is an act of faith, trusting that everything meant for you will remain or return. You don't chase alignment. You attract it through peace. The moment you stop clinging, the right things start coming. Energy flows freely when fear no longer blocks it. Detachment isn't distance, it's direction. You were never meant to carry everything. Detachment teaches you to travel light, with faith as your luggage and peace as your companion. And when you finally master it, you'll realize detachment isn't the end of connection. It's the beginning of freedom, because when you stop needing everything to stay, that's when you finally start to grow. Chapter 5. Rebuild your confidence, brick by brick. Confidence doesn't return in a single moment of clarity. It rebuilds through repetition, through action, through quiet victories no one sees. When life breaks you, you can't force belief back into yourself overnight. You earn it, one brick at a time. Every small act of discipline, every promise kept, every fear faced becomes another layer of foundation beneath your feet. That's how self-belief is built, not through motivation, but through evidence. The reason you lost confidence wasn't because you failed. It was because you stopped trusting yourself. Every time you said you'd change and didn't, every time you promised yourself progress but stayed still, you chipped away at your own credibility. Confidence is self-trust, and the only way to rebuild it is to keep your word to yourself, even when no one's watching. You can't think your way into confidence. You act your way into it. Action is the antidote to self-doubt. Every time you move forward despite fear, you teach your mind that you're reliable. The more you act, the more your mind believes you. Confidence isn't arrogance, it's consistency. It's the quiet knowledge that you've proven yourself to yourself. Rebuilding confidence starts with one shift. Stop waiting to feel ready. Readiness is a myth that kills momentum. The most powerful people you admire didn't wait to believe. They began while afraid, while uncertain, while broken. Confidence grows from courage, not comfort. You earn it through the act of beginning. Confidence is fragile when it depends on validation. The moment you build it around approval, it collapses the second approval disappears. That's why true confidence is internal. It doesn't need applause. It thrives in silence. You rebuild it by detaching your worth from outcomes and rooting it in effort. You've been through seasons where everything fell apart, and yet here you are. That's evidence. Every hardship you survived is proof of capability, but your mind forgets, so you must remind it. List your survival stories, your victories, your recoveries. Confidence grows through remembrance, not of what broke you, but of how you endured. When you rebuild confidence, you stop demanding perfection. You stop punishing yourself for mistakes. The truth is, self-hatred never builds strength. It only breaks what's left. Speak to yourself like someone you're responsible for saving. You cannot shame yourself into greatness. You nurture yourself into it. The foundation of confidence is discipline. You build faith in yourself by doing what you said you would do again and again. Every repetition becomes a vote for your future self. Each small win compounds. Over time, belief becomes automatic, not because it's imagined, but because it's earned. Confidence rebuilds fastest when you stop comparing. Comparison poisons progress. You're not supposed to be where they are. You're supposed to be where you're building. The real competition is between your current self and your potential self. Each day you improve, you win. The process will feel slow. There will be days you question if it's working. But confidence doesn't shout its arrival. It grows in silence. One morning you'll wake up and realize you no longer hesitate, no longer seek permission, no longer need proof. That's when you'll know you're rebuilt. Confidence is not ego, it's alignment. It's when your thoughts, words, and actions move in the same direction. The more you live in integrity, the stronger your inner voice becomes. You stop asking for reassurance because your actions already gave you the answer. The reason most people stay insecure is because they want confidence without consequence. They want the feeling without the work. But confidence demands sacrifice, of laziness, of doubt, of excuses. You can't build strength while clinging to weakness. When rebuilding confidence, patience is key. The mind heals slower than the heart. Don't rush it. Each time you stand up after failure, your resilience deepens. Every scar becomes a reminder that you survived what once scared you. The person you're becoming is worth the wait. To rebuild confidence, start with structure. Build habits so solid they carry you on the days you feel lost. Routine is the scaffolding of self-trust. When everything else feels unstable, discipline becomes your anchor. That's how leaders rebuild after collapse, through structure, not emotion. The enemy of confidence is overthinking. The more you analyze your worth, the weaker it becomes. Confidence isn't built through reflection, it's built through repetition. Stop debating whether you can. Start proving that you can. The mind follows evidence. Confidence grows when you embrace discomfort. Every time you do something difficult, your brain rewires itself to associate challenge with capability. Fear loses power when faced repeatedly. Growth begins when resistance ends. You can't rebuild confidence in the same environment that broke it. If your surroundings feed doubt, change them. Confidence isn't only psychological, it's environmental. Build spaces that remind you of strength, not failure. Learn to celebrate small wins again. Every step forward is proof of momentum. Don't wait for massive achievements to validate you. Gratitude for progress fuels persistence. Confidence thrives on acknowledgement. The most powerful form of confidence is quiet. You stop broadcasting, stop proving, stop performing. You move with assurance that doesn't need announcement. You know who you are and what you're capable of, even when others don't. When rebuilding, you'll face relapse. Days where old insecurities whisper again. Don't panic. That's part of the rebuilding process. Confidence isn't linear, it's layered. Each fall strengthens your foundation if you choose to rise differently. Confidence comes back through courage. Every risk taken reinforces trust. Every failure survived strengthens resilience. You realize pain was never punishment. It was preparation. It taught you what you can withstand. You rebuild confidence by staying consistent when no one believes in you. Validation may fade, but self-respect must remain. The more you honor your own effort, the less external approval matters. Detach from the need to be perfect. Perfection is insecurity disguised as control. Confidence is knowing you'll figure it out, even if you don't have all the answers yet. That's what separates leaders from followers. The secret is to stop chasing confidence and start behaving like someone who already has it. Act first, feel later. The emotion will catch up to the evidence. Rebuilding confidence is spiritual. It's learning to trust the unseen, your potential, your purpose, your process. You can't see the future version of you yet, but every disciplined act brings you closer. Confidence doesn't come from others believing in you. It comes from believing in your ability to recover. Once you master recovery, you become unstoppable. The real test of confidence isn't when things go right, it's when they fall apart. Can you still trust yourself when life doesn't follow your plan? That's where true belief is proven. As confidence grows, silence follows. You no longer need to explain your path. You start moving with quiet certainty, knowing your results will speak louder than reassurance ever could. Confidence rebuilt through discipline becomes permanent. No criticism can shake it, no failure can erase it, no rejection can define it. Because it's not built on opinion, it's built on evidence. And one day, you'll look in the mirror and realize the person staring back finally believes again. Not because life got easier, but because you rebuilt yourself brick by brick until doubt had nowhere left to live. Chapter 6. The Discipline of Walking Alone. Walking alone is not a punishment, it's a test of discipline. It's where the noise stops, the validation fades, and the real work begins. Anyone can move when cheered for, but few can keep moving when the world goes silent. The discipline of walking alone is the highest form of strength because it demands consistency without applause, belief without backup, and endurance without witnesses. When you walk alone, you meet the truth of your own character. You can't hide behind company or convenience anymore. You see exactly how strong, how focused, how patient you really are. The world loves to tell you that independence means loneliness, but real independence means freedom. Freedom from needing anyone to believe in your path before you do. The discipline of walking alone starts when you stop chasing companionship out of fear. Most people would rather stay stuck than walk alone because solitude exposes them. But aloneness is not absence, it's awareness. It forces you to build structure when comfort disappears. The weak wait for support. The strong build systems that don't require it. To walk alone is to master your emotions. You can't afford to break down every time you're misunderstood or doubted. Solitude teaches control. It teaches you to respond, not react. When no one's there to stabilize you, you become your own balance. That's how power is born, not in the crowd, but in the quiet. Discipline in solitude means showing up regardless of how you feel. It means doing the work even when no one will notice. The lonely path is the one that turns ordinary people into extraordinary creators. The world doesn't remember those who waited for approval. It remembers those who built regardless. When you walk alone, time slows down. The distractions fade, and what remains is pure focus. You start noticing how much of your old life was noise disguised as connection. Solitude becomes sacred, not because it's peaceful, but because it's productive. You start realizing that your best ideas, your deepest healing, your sharpest clarity, all happen in silence. Walking alone reveals who you are when no one's watching. Do you keep your word when it's no longer convenient? Do you still give your best when the reward isn't guaranteed? Discipline is not built in comfort. It's built in moments of invisible effort. When you stop fearing solitude, you become unstoppable. Because once you learn to stand alone, no rejection, no delay, no betrayal can paralyze you again. You start moving not for attention, but for alignment. You stop chasing company and start attracting respect. The discipline of walking alone means knowing when to separate. Not everyone can go where you're going. Some will slow you down, some will doubt you, some will drain you. The disciplined don't resent that. They release it. They understand that separation is not arrogance, it's efficiency. In solitude, your purpose grows louder. Without the noise of opinions, your inner voice starts leading again. You rediscover what you actually want, not what the world told you to want. That's where independence becomes power, when your direction is internal, not borrowed. Walking alone demands trust, not in others, but in your process. You stop asking for reassurance because you understand that faith isn't supposed to feel certain, it's supposed to feel committed. The discipline of solitude teaches patience through uncertainty. It's easy to stay motivated when surrounded by energy. It's much harder when it's just you, tired, unseen, and still moving. But that's what separates the disciplined from the dreamers. Consistency without witnesses builds unshakable confidence. You stop hoping and start becoming. When you walk alone, you learn the art of emotional endurance. You stop collapsing under pressure. You stop needing comfort to perform. You adapt to solitude the same way an athlete adapts to altitude. It strengthens your capacity to thrive when others can't breathe. Discipline in solitude means keeping structure when motivation disappears. You don't wait to feel like it. You do it because it's required. That's what maturity sounds like. Action divorced from emotion. People will misunderstand your isolation. They'll call it arrogance, detachment, or obsession. Let them. They can't see that your silence is strategy, not sadness. You're not withdrawing from the world. You're building something the world won't understand until it's finished. The discipline of walking alone will test your faith in your future. You'll doubt yourself. You'll wonder if it's worth it. But every step forward proves one thing. You are not fragile anymore. You don't break under silence. You bloom in it. Solitude teaches accountability. When you're alone, excuses die. There's no one else to blame, no one to depend on. The mirror becomes your mentor. You start correcting yourself before the world can. You stop chasing quick results because you understand compounding. The disciplined build brick by brick, trusting the process more than the applause. Patience becomes your sharpest weapon. You know that speed fades, but consistency compounds. When you walk alone long enough, strength becomes your default setting. You stop asking for easier roads because you've mastered hard ones. Pain becomes familiar, but it no longer scares you. It becomes part of the rhythm, resistance that builds power. Discipline means building even when you're invisible. It means staying in motion when no one's clapping. It means believing in the harvest before the seed even sprouts. Solitude is the season that separates the real from the comfortable. Walking alone sharpens your vision. You stop looking sideways. You stop needing validation. Your eyes stay fixed on the mission ahead. You start realizing that solitude doesn't slow progress. It removes distractions. The disciplined life is lonely by design. Few can handle the silence it demands. But in that silence, you gain something rarer than company: control. You control your reactions, your focus, your destiny. Solitude removes illusion. You see the truth of everything, who actually supports you, what really matters, what you've been avoiding. The more honest you get, the freer you become. Truth, after all, is the foundation of power. The discipline of walking alone is the bridge between potential and power. It's where dreams stop being ideas and start becoming evidence. You can't fake it. You either walk it or you don't. In solitude, consistency becomes your religion. You stop worshipping motivation and start worshipping movement. You show up daily, not for applause, but because discipline has become identity. Walking alone trains emotional neutrality. You learn to move without needing excitement. You stop chasing highs and start mastering steadiness. Peace becomes your performance enhancer. When you master the discipline of solitude, you stop begging the world to see you. You no longer fear being unseen because you know your silence is not absence, it's incubation. The people who laugh at your isolation will one day study your independence. Solitude is the phase every great builder goes through before the unveiling. The difference is you didn't need them to start. Every quiet morning, every unseen effort, every lonely night spent working, these moments are the bricks of your foundation. Later, they'll call you lucky. They'll call you gifted, but you'll know the truth. You just didn't quit when no one was watching. To walk alone is to rise above dependency. You stop being emotionally manipulated by attention, love, or approval. You give yourself what you once begged for: focus, faith, and follow through. Discipline doesn't shout. It doesn't seek applause. It just repeats, refines, and rebuilds. Over time, the quiet effort becomes unstoppable momentum. You become self-sufficient, not just emotionally, but spiritually. The longer you walk alone, the less you crave company, not because you dislike people, but because you love your peace more. The stillness that once scared you becomes your home. Eventually, walking alone doesn't feel lonely. It feels powerful. You realize you were never truly by yourself. Every step you took was accompanied by purpose. Every sacrifice was guided by something higher. And when you finally emerge, you'll see what solitude made of you: sharp, calm, disciplined, and unbreakable. You'll understand why you had to walk alone, because strength built in silence doesn't fade. It echoes for life. The longer you walk alone, the more you realize silence is not empty. It's full of information. You begin to hear the subtleties of your own intuition, the guidance that was once buried beneath noise. When there's no one left to impress, the truth finally speaks. That truth becomes your compass, your anchor, and your guide. Discipline thrives in isolation because there's nowhere to hide. There's no audience to perform for, no one to blame for distraction. Every success, every failure, every choice is yours. That's not a burden, it's freedom. Accountability becomes your superpower because ownership becomes your identity. Solitude tests your will in ways comfort never will. It asks, will you keep going when it's not exciting anymore? When the world doesn't clap, when results don't show, when progress is invisible, will you still move? The disciplined don't need motivation. They're moved by mission. There's a quiet war happening inside those who walk alone, the battle between doubt and discipline. Doubt whispers, "You're wasting time." Discipline replies, "Keep going." That conversation decides everything. The one who keeps walking, even while uncertain, eventually wins. When you walk alone, the mind becomes both your best friend and your worst enemy. Without mastery, solitude can eat you alive. But once you train your thoughts, silence becomes your sanctuary. You realize control isn't about forcing the world. It's about governing your own mind. Every season of solitude strengthens your spiritual backbone. You stop needing constant validation to feel significant. You understand that meaning doesn't come from being seen. It comes from being steady. When the storms come, the world shakes, but you stay rooted. You start realizing that walking alone doesn't mean walking without purpose. It means walking without distraction. The fewer people in your circle, the clearer your path becomes. You stop explaining your direction because you've learned. People who aren't walking with you can't understand your destination. The disciplined build structure around solitude. They treat it like training, a sacred ritual of refinement. Wake, work, reflect, repeat. Each repetition builds endurance. Discipline becomes muscle memory. Solitude becomes your mentor. Every time you choose discipline over distraction, you prove your strength to yourself. You no longer need evidence from others. Your consistency is enough. The person who can stay focused alone holds infinite power over those who need to be pushed. Walking alone exposes your patterns. You start seeing how often you sought comfort over clarity, validation over vision. You learn to detach from what slows you down because you realize energy is currency, and you're done spending it on things that don't pay back. When you no longer fear being alone, manipulation loses its power. The world can't guilt you, peers can't pressure you, and failure can't frighten you. You move by conviction, not crowd approval. That's emotional independence, the highest form of strength. The disciplined understand that solitude is the price of greatness. Every master walked through the wilderness before the world recognized them. The darkness wasn't punishment, it was preparation. Solitude forges character in ways applause never can. When you walk alone, every decision becomes deliberate. You stop rushing, stop reacting. You move with precision, not panic. Patience becomes your weapon. You understand that power doesn't come from speed. It comes from staying the course. Walking alone will make you question everything, your goals, your beliefs, your worth. But that's the point. The noise of others keeps you asleep. Solitude wakes you up. The questions that scare you are the same ones that set you free. Discipline in solitude is measured by your ability to stay consistent when the outcome is invisible. You learn to act without reward. That's how you train true endurance, doing the right thing, even when it doesn't feel like it's working. The disciplined don't chase comfort. They chase capacity. They understand that every lonely moment is building resilience, stretching potential, toughening mindset. Walking alone becomes the gym of the soul, painful at first, but transformative in time. Every failure hits differently when you're alone. There's no one to blame, no one to comfort you. But that's also the beauty. You learn to self-soothe, self-correct, self-elevate. You stop breaking every time something breaks. You learn to rebuild faster. Walking alone reveals the difference between solitude and isolation. Isolation feels like emptiness. Solitude feels like expansion. When you're disciplined, solitude becomes abundance, the place where ideas, clarity, and strength multiply. You start moving differently when you realize solitude isn't the absence of people. It's the presence of purpose. Every step alone becomes a statement. I no longer need permission to progress. That's not arrogance, it's alignment. Discipline requires repetition without recognition. You wake up early, stay focused, work late, and no one sees it. But the results compound silently. The world will call you an overnight success later, unaware of the 1,000 silent days that built you. Walking alone makes you self-reliant. You stop waiting for opportunities. You start creating them. You no longer depend on doors to open. You build your own. Independence replaces impatience. You don't chase. You construct. When you walk alone, your standards rise. You stop entertaining mediocrity because you've spent too much time mastering excellence. You become allergic to laziness, even your own. You've seen what solitude can produce, and now you expect more from yourself. The discipline of walking alone teaches you emotional regulation. You can't afford to break every time you're tired or triggered. You learn to breathe through chaos, to rest without quitting, to think before reacting. That's maturity in motion. You realize that walking alone doesn't mean doing everything alone. It means not depending on anyone to keep you moving. You can still collaborate, but you no longer collapse without support. That's true autonomy. Discipline turns solitude into strategy. You begin using quiet to plan, reflect, refine. What used to feel like absence now feels like advantage. The silence becomes your office. Your thoughts become your allies. When you're alone, you learn that progress is not always visible. Sometimes it's internal. Growth happens in perspective before it happens in results. The more you master solitude, the more your outer world starts to mirror your inner control. Walking alone strengthens faith, not in luck, not in timing, but in yourself. You learn to trust that no matter what happens, you can adapt. You've seen yourself survive too much to ever doubt your ability to rise again. In solitude, fear shows its face. Fear of failure, of rejection, of irrelevance. But instead of running, you start negotiating with fear. You learn its patterns. You learn that courage isn't the absence of fear. It's the decision to move anyway. Discipline demands that you turn pain into momentum. Every disappointment becomes data, every setback a lesson. Walking alone turns failure into feedback. You no longer take things personally, you take them strategically. The person who can walk alone can walk anywhere. They can adapt to any environment, survive any loss, rebuild after any ending. Solitude makes you durable, flexible, grounded, and fearless. When you master the art of walking alone, time becomes your ally. You stop rushing the process. You let success mature instead of forcing it. The slow build becomes your edge, because rushed success never lasts, but earned success never fades. Walking alone reveals how little you need to stay grounded. You realize peace doesn't come from excess, it comes from alignment. The less you carry, the lighter you move. Detachment becomes liberation. The discipline of solitude makes you untouchable by chaos. The louder the world gets, the calmer you become. You don't chase quiet, you carry it. It becomes your default state, your mental armor. When others burn out chasing recognition, you keep building in peace. Solitude taught you to pace yourself, to focus on sustainability over speed. You don't need spotlight, you're building legacy. And one day, when you look back at the long road you walked alone, you'll smile. Because every lonely step became a brick in your empire. Every silent struggle became a page in your story. You'll realize solitude didn't separate you from success. It sculpted you for it. Chapter 7. Becoming the person you needed. There comes a point where you stop waiting for someone to save you and start realizing you were meant to become your own savior. The person you needed was never supposed to arrive. They were supposed to awaken within you. Life doesn't give you what you want. It gives you what you must become. Every pain, every betrayal, every disappointment was the training ground for that transformation. You needed someone who wouldn't give up on you, and now that must be you. You needed someone who would believe in you when no one else did. That's your job now. You can't outsource strength anymore. You must build it. You become the protector, the guide, the anchor you once searched for. That's what true healing looks like. Becoming the person you needed means forgiving the past versions of yourself that didn't know better. You stop blaming them for their mistakes and start thanking them for their survival. They got you here. Every choice, even the wrong ones, was part of the map. Growth begins when you stop judging your journey and start honoring it. You can't heal waiting for closure from others. The person you needed would have given you peace. Now you must create it. Closure isn't given, it's built. You stop needing apologies, validation, or acknowledgement. You close chapters not because they're complete, but because you're done rereading them. Becoming the person you needed means standing tall where you once kneeled. It's refusing to abandon yourself again. You learn to give yourself the love, patience, and consistency you once begged for. The moment you treat yourself like someone worth protecting, the world starts to reflect that same respect. You start seeing your past differently. The people who hurt you were teachers disguised as enemies. They showed you your thresholds, your blind spots, your values. You don't have to like what they did, but you can extract what it taught you. That's emotional maturity, turning wounds into wisdom. You realize that strength isn't about never breaking. It's about learning how to rebuild. The person you needed wasn't fearless. They were faithful. They kept going despite fear. They kept showing up when it hurt. That's the blueprint. You become unshakable, not by avoiding pain, but by mastering recovery. Every lonely night, every silent battle, every unseen effort was shaping the version of you who doesn't depend on rescue. The person you needed is forged in those moments, in discipline, in accountability, in truth. You stop wishing for help and start creating habits that make you unstoppable. To become the person you needed, you must outgrow the need to be understood. Not everyone will see your transformation. Some will criticize it, others will envy it. That's fine. You're not becoming who they want. You're becoming who you were meant to be. Let misunderstanding be the cost of evolution. Healing requires reparenting your own soul. You start talking to yourself like someone you love. You stop saying, "I'm broken," and start saying, "I'm rebuilding." You become your own nurturer, your own motivator, your own reminder that you are enough, not someday, but now. Becoming the person you needed means breaking the cycles that once trapped you. You stop repeating patterns of neglect, doubt, and dependency. You become the interruption in your family's story, the one who chooses awareness over avoidance, accountability over excuse. You become the new beginning. When you finally become the person you needed, you stop craving shortcuts. You understand that the process is the point. Every struggle, every delay, every test is shaping endurance. You're no longer desperate to arrive, you're devoted to becoming. The person you needed didn't rely on motivation, they relied on principles. They showed up even when it wasn't convenient. You learn to do the same. Discipline becomes love in motion. Every act of effort says, "I refuse to abandon myself again." You'll start realizing that peace is not passive, it's power. The person you needed would have protected their energy, and now, so do you. You stop fighting battles that don't build you. You choose calm, not because you're weak, but because you're wise. To become the person you needed, you must outgrow the illusion that healing is comfortable. Growth will stretch you, solitude will refine you, and pain will polish you. But that's how diamonds form, under pressure, in darkness, over time. Becoming that person means holding yourself accountable with compassion. You don't sugarcoat your flaws, but you don't shame them either. You confront them with honesty and patience. That balance is what the younger version of you always needed. Someone firm but kind. Every time you rise after falling, you're proving to yourself that you're reliable. You can count on you. That's real confidence. Not ego, not pride, but trust in your own resilience. The person you needed was dependable. Now you are. You'll notice how your standards rise when you start honoring yourself. You stop chasing people who treat you like an option because you finally treat yourself like a priority. Self-respect becomes your filter for connection. The person you needed always had boundaries, and now so do you. The version of you that's emerging doesn't need to explain anymore. They simply move with quiet assurance. They've learned that validation is optional when purpose is clear. You're not performing anymore. You're embodying. Every time you choose discipline over distraction, forgiveness over bitterness, focus over noise, you're reinforcing your new identity. You stop living reactively and start living intentionally. You're no longer surviving, you're sculpting. The person you needed didn't fear solitude, they used it. You learn to embrace your own company. The silence that once haunted you becomes healing. You stop running from alone because now you've built someone worth being alone with. When you become the person you needed, you stop waiting for permission to start over. You create your own new beginning. You no longer wait for the right time. You make time right through commitment. That's what maturity sounds like. Decisive peace. You'll realize that strength is no longer loud. It's not rebellion, it's refinement. The person you needed didn't need to prove their power. They carried it. They spoke less, moved with precision, and radiated calm. You inherit that energy. Becoming that person means rewriting your relationship with failure. You stop taking it personally. You see it as practice, data that refines your direction. The person you needed would have told you, failure doesn't mean you're not capable. It means you're still learning. When you stop identifying with pain and start identifying with purpose, everything changes. You no longer see challenges as obstacles. You see them as opportunities for refinement. Pain becomes mentorship. Becoming the person you needed means giving yourself grace during growth. You stop expecting perfection from yourself. You understand that transformation is messy, and that's okay. Progress isn't always visible, but it's always happening. The moment you stop trying to prove your worth, you step into it. The person you needed never begged for recognition. They embodied value through actions. You do the same. You stop explaining and start exemplifying. You'll find peace in accountability. The person you needed didn't make excuses. They made adjustments. You start owning every part of your story. The good, the bad, the evolving. That's how power is maintained, through responsibility. Becoming the person you needed means letting go of unrealistic timelines. You stop rushing healing, rushing success, rushing love. You realize that divine timing rewards those who prepare in silence. Patience becomes your ally, not your enemy. You'll start protecting your energy the way you once protected your excuses. You understand that peace is a project. It requires daily work. The person you needed always guarded their focus, and now so do you. When you finally become that person, forgiveness becomes natural. You forgive those who couldn't love you properly because you no longer need their love to validate your worth. Forgiveness frees your energy for what's next. You'll know you've become the person you needed when you no longer chase potential, in others or in yourself. You operate from alignment, not desperation. You attract peace because you've become it. The journey to becoming that person isn't about becoming perfect. It's about becoming whole. You integrate every lesson, every scar, every loss. You stop rejecting parts of yourself and start using them as fuel. And when you look back, you'll realize the person you needed was never missing. They were waiting inside you all along, buried beneath doubt and pain. And now that you've found them, you'll never abandon yourself again. The moment you start showing up for yourself consistently, the inner child inside you starts to heal. They finally see that someone kept their promise. Every disciplined act becomes reassurance. You're safe now. You learn that healing isn't about erasing pain. It's about giving the broken parts of you a new leader, one who doesn't abandon them anymore. When you become the person you needed, you start prioritizing peace over performance. You stop chasing people's approval and begin chasing alignment with your values. You no longer bend yourself to be accepted. You honor your truth, even when it costs you comfort. That's the courage the old you prayed for. You begin treating yourself with the same patience you once gave everyone else. You stop rushing your growth because you understand that real change takes time. The person you needed would have told you to rest, not quit. So now you give yourself that grace. Growth isn't a race, it's a rhythm. The stronger you become, the softer you grow. Strength without compassion turns to pride, and compassion without strength turns to weakness. Becoming the person you needed means embodying both, the power to lead and the tenderness to understand. You become firm with boundaries, but gentle with your heart. When you evolve, you realize not everyone will celebrate your growth, and that's okay. You no longer need the world's applause to feel worthy. The person you needed moved quietly. They didn't seek to be understood, only to be authentic. You start walking that same path, silent, steady, and self-assured. You stop repeating the same lessons once you honor the first one. Life stops recycling pain when you finally act differently. The person you needed had emotional intelligence. They didn't react, they responded. Now you do too. You understand that peace is a decision, not a gift. Becoming who you needed means taking responsibility for your emotions. You stop waiting for someone to make you feel loved, seen, or appreciated. You give that to yourself daily through discipline, mindfulness, and care. Love becomes an action, not a dependency. You learn to be okay with being misunderstood. The person you needed didn't explain themselves to everyone. They lived their truth unapologetically. You realize your purpose isn't to convince, it's to create. You don't argue with noise, you outgrow it. Every version of you that once begged for approval starts to fade. You stop seeking mirrors in others to validate your reflection. You recognize your worth without needing to be seen. The silence that once felt lonely now feels like liberation. To become the person you needed, you must break your addiction to chaos. You stop confusing intensity with love. You stop mistaking inconsistency for excitement. You choose calm over chaos, not because it's easy, but because it's sustainable. You start embracing solitude as sacred time for evolution. You stop fearing being alone, because now solitude feels like strength. The person you needed didn't fill silence with noise. They used it to listen. You start using silence to rebuild, to plan, to grow. You'll notice that your standards no longer feel high. They feel natural. You're not being picky, you're being precise. The person you needed didn't settle, and now neither do you. You understand that peace and progress require protection. Becoming the person you needed means learning emotional neutrality. You stop reacting to every opinion, every delay, every disappointment. The stronger you get internally, the less control the external world has over you. Calm becomes your default setting. The person you needed didn't complain, they corrected. You stop venting to everyone about your struggles and start solving them. You become resourceful instead of resentful. Every problem becomes an opportunity to practice your new strength. You learn to love yourself not through words, but through standards. You stop accepting half-effort friendships, one-sided relationships, and inconsistent effort. You become allergic to what drains you. The person you needed respected themselves. Now you do too. When you become the person you needed, you stop chasing validation and start building value. You no longer look for applause because your results speak for themselves. You understand that legacy is louder than attention. You start practicing gratitude for every hardship, every heartbreak, every delay, every closed door. All of it was shaping your patience, teaching your discernment. The person you needed saw purpose in pain. Now you live with that same awareness. You begin leading yourself daily, not through motivation, but through mission. You no longer wait to feel inspired. You show up out of respect for your own potential. The person you needed had consistency. You embody it now. You start speaking to yourself with authority. No more passive hope, only firm conviction. I will replaces I wish. The person you needed didn't hope for change. They became it. That shift in language transforms your entire reality. You understand that boundaries aren't walls. They're doors with locks. You decide who enters your peace, who earns your energy, who stays. The person you needed would have protected their space. Now you fiercely protect yours. The more you become that person, the less reactive you become. You don't chase revenge, you chase results. You don't fight for attention, you focus on evolution. Peace becomes your proof that you've leveled up. You start loving your past instead of resenting it. You see it as the soil from which you grew. Every version of you served a purpose. The person you needed would have told you that nothing was wasted, not even the pain. Becoming the person you needed means no longer waiting for the right moment. You make every moment right by showing up. Action replaces overthinking. Movement replaces fear. You stop waiting for clarity and start creating it. You stop seeking closure from those who broke you. You give it to yourself through acceptance. You realize you don't need their apology. You need your own permission to move on. That's emotional liberation. The person you needed didn't chase people. They attracted purpose. You stop proving your worth and start embodying it. The energy of self-respect draws the right things toward you and repels what isn't aligned. You learn that forgiveness is freedom, not for them, but for you. Holding on to resentment keeps you tethered to your pain. The person you needed didn't carry bitterness. They carried lessons. You carry the same now. Every day you show up for yourself, you prove that healing isn't a single event. It's a lifestyle. The person you needed wasn't perfect. They were persistent. You stop chasing quick transformation and start committing to lifelong evolution. You start trusting your timing. You stop comparing your path to others because you realize every journey unfolds with precision. The person you needed was patient. They didn't panic during waiting seasons. Now, neither do you. Becoming that person requires humility. You admit when you're wrong. You learn when you fail. You grow through feedback. You realize power without humility turns into arrogance, and arrogance destroys wisdom. The more you grow, the quieter you become. You stop defending your growth to people who are still committed to misunderstanding you. Silence becomes your filter for peace. You stop seeking comfort and start seeking clarity. The person you needed wasn't afraid of discomfort. They embraced it as evidence of growth. You start doing the same. Growth becomes your reward, not recognition. You begin valuing consistency over chemistry. The person you needed showed up even when it wasn't exciting. Now you understand that commitment builds connection deeper than emotion ever could. Becoming that person means teaching by example. You don't preach growth, you live it. You don't demand respect, you embody it. You stop saying someday and start saying now. You learn to rest without regression. You can take breaks without falling apart. You've built systems strong enough to hold you through fatigue. The person you needed had balance, and now you do too. You start becoming someone others can depend on, not because you crave importance, but because you've built reliability from discipline. You become the light you once searched for in others. And finally, one day you'll realize that the person you needed never actually left you. They were buried beneath fear, waiting for you to step up. And when you did, when you chose strength over suffering, faith over fear, that version finally came alive. You became them. You became whole. Chapter 8. Rising again. Stronger, wiser, unshakable. Rising again doesn't happen in one grand moment. It happens in 1,000 quiet ones. Every morning you choose to show up after falling. Every night you refuse to let despair win. That's resurrection. Strength isn't built through ease. It's born through endurance. You rise not because life becomes lighter, but because you become heavier with wisdom, with resilience, with faith in your own rebirth. You rise stronger because you've been broken before. Pain has taught you patience, loss has taught you gratitude, and solitude has taught you clarity. Every scar is a scripture of survival, a reminder that what once tried to destroy you only trained you. You no longer fear collapse. You've rebuilt too many times to ever doubt your ability to rebuild again. Rising is not about returning to who you were. It's about evolving into someone your old self couldn't handle. You don't want to go back. You've outgrown that version. The person you're becoming wouldn't fit into the life you once begged for. Every ending was redirection disguised as heartbreak. Strength now lives in your stillness. You no longer fight every battle. You no longer chase every argument. The wiser version of you understands that peace is power. You rise differently when you realize not everything deserves your energy. You conserve it for creation, for clarity, for calling. The unshakable don't seek revenge. They seek refinement. You stop trying to prove your worth to those who doubted you. Their disbelief was fuel, not failure. You learn to let results speak for you. Silence becomes your language of strength. Your progress becomes your response. Rising again means redefining success. It's no longer about applause or validation. It's about integrity, fulfillment, and freedom. You measure growth not by what you gain, but by what you no longer need. The less you crave from others, the more powerful you become. Every downfall teaches humility. It shows you what truly matters: health, peace, alignment. You stop idolizing the superficial and start honoring the spiritual. The wiser you get, the simpler your life becomes. Complexity fades where wisdom grows. You rise when you stop blaming the storm and start studying it. Every challenge carries a message. Pain isn't punishment, it's a guide. Once you learn to extract wisdom from suffering, life stops defeating you and starts developing you. Strength isn't about never breaking. It's about mastering repair. You no longer fear failure because you know how to rebuild. You've learned that resilience isn't a reaction. It's a rhythm. You get up faster, think clearer, and move smarter each time. The unshakable don't rush healing. They understand that true restoration takes time. You can't rebuild something real overnight. Every day spent healing in silence becomes the foundation for decades of peace. Slow progress is sacred progress. Rising again requires forgiveness, not for others, but for yourself. You forgive the version of you that tolerated less, that stayed too long, that settled too often. They didn't know better, but now you do. Wisdom begins the moment self-blame ends. You rise stronger when you stop needing validation to feel valuable. The wiser you become, the quieter you move. You no longer chase recognition. You build reality. The approval you used to crave becomes irrelevant once you start living aligned with your truth. Every setback you've survived was preparation for mastery. You've learned that pain expands capacity. Each test refined your patience, your perspective, your poise. You're not the same person anymore. You're more grounded, more certain, more selective. To rise again, you must detach from the timeline. You stop asking, when will it happen, and start declaring, it's already happening. Faith isn't passive. It's persistence in motion. You keep building, trusting that timing favors the disciplined. You rise by embracing gratitude, even for what hurt you. Gratitude rewires your perspective. It turns loss into learning, chaos into clarity. When you thank the pain, you strip it of power. You start seeing everything as useful, even what once broke you. The unshakable understand that peace is not the absence of struggle, but mastery within it. You stop waiting for calm to arrive and start carrying it. The world still shakes, but you don't. That's what wisdom looks like. Emotional gravity. Rising again means not flinching at the past anymore. What used to haunt you now humbles you. You see how far you've come, how deeply you've changed. The same pain that once silenced you now speaks through you as wisdom. You become a messenger of resilience. You rise when you stop resisting life's transitions. Change is no longer your enemy. It's your evolution. You understand that discomfort is divine direction. The moments you lost control were the moments you were being rerouted. The stronger you become, the less you explain. You no longer defend your healing, your silence, or your solitude. You've learned that peace doesn't require justification. It requires protection. Wisdom doesn't shout. It moves with quiet precision. Every time you rise, the world looks different, not because it changed, but because your perception did. Pain sharpened your vision. You see through illusion now. You no longer mistake attention for affection or chaos for passion. That's real maturity. Rising again is spiritual work. You stop trying to control the outcome and start trusting the process. You begin to see the divine order in your detours. The delays that once frustrated you now make perfect sense. They were preparation. The unshakable version of you doesn't crave revenge. You've transcended it. You no longer want to prove anything. You just want peace. You understand that nothing weighs more than resentment. So you release it, and with that release, you rise. Strength grows from surrender. You stop forcing what's not flowing. You stop begging for what's fading. You let life rearrange itself without resistance. What's meant for you will recognize your frequency when you're aligned, not when you're anxious. You rise wiser because you finally understand energy. You know when to give, when to guard, when to go. You no longer chase closure or cling to confusion. You honor your intuition. It's never wrong. That inner knowing becomes your compass. Rising again means mastering composure. You stop reacting to chaos and start observing it. You realize not every fire requires your attention. Some flames die out when you stop feeding them. Emotional restraint becomes strength, disguised as serenity. The unshakable version of you doesn't chase comfort, they chase clarity. You stop needing life to be easy because you're trained for hard. The harder it gets, the calmer you become. Pressure becomes a privilege. Proof that you're trusted with more. You rise by no longer fearing solitude. You've already seen that silence doesn't destroy, it develops. You've met yourself in isolation, and now you trust yourself completely. That's a confidence that can't be taught, only earned. Rising again means embodying wisdom through patience. You no longer need instant results to validate your work. You've learned that timing tests faith. You stay consistent even when unseen because you understand the harvest always arrives for those who keep planting. The stronger you become, the softer your approach. You stop fighting everyone and start mastering yourself. You no longer chase dominance, you chase direction. The person you've become leads through peace, not pressure. Every rise refines your circle. You no longer tolerate low-energy conversations, surface relationships, or draining environments. The higher you grow, the quieter your surroundings become. Energy mismatched with your peace can't stay. You rise wiser because you know that power isn't loud. It's deliberate. It's not in appearance, but in awareness. You can walk into any room quietly and still shift the atmosphere because your energy speaks before you do. The unshakable have learned the value of detachment. You give your best to everything, but you're not enslaved by outcomes. You've learned to participate without possession. Freedom begins when expectation ends. Rising again means falling in love with discipline. You've stopped craving motivation because you've learned that consistency creates miracles. You no longer chase highs, you build habits. That's how confidence compounds. You rise when you start moving with faith that no step is wasted. You understand that even in confusion, you're being shaped. Purpose is often hidden in pain, but you've learned how to mine meaning from it. Every tear watered a future blessing. Strength now looks like self-control. You stop over-explaining, overworking, over-giving. You've learned that restraint is a form of power. You no longer try to prove, you just perform with precision. The unshakable don't live for applause, they live for alignment. They've learned that peace outlasts praise. You rise higher when you stop chasing moments and start building momentum. And when you finally look back at the wreckage you once feared, you'll smile, because you'll see that every fall, every scar, every lonely night was necessary. You didn't just survive, you transformed. You rose again, stronger, wiser, and unshakable. The storm didn't end you, it introduced you to your highest self. Every time life knocks you down, it's not trying to destroy you, it's trying to remind you of your depth. You were never meant to live soft, you were meant to rise sharp. The setbacks you once cursed were actually invitations to evolve. The ones who grow after breaking are the ones who stop asking, "Why me?" and start saying, "Try me." Pain becomes less of an obstacle and more of an awakening. You rise again when you stop treating survival like the goal and start treating growth like the mission. Survival means you endured. Growth means you elevated. You've outgrown the phase of barely making it. Now you're mastering it. Every scar you carry isn't a sign of defeat. It's the proof that you've been refined by fire and came out gold. Strength after suffering doesn't roar, it whispers. It shows in how you handle pressure with calm, in how you face chaos with clarity. You no longer crumble under discomfort because you've learned to extract wisdom from it. You've turned emotional storms into spiritual training. Every hardship built muscles invisible to the eye. You rise differently when you stop expecting life to be fair. You no longer beg for easy seasons because you know growth hides inside difficulty. You've accepted that discomfort is part of destiny. The moment you stopped resisting the hard, everything started working in your favor. Acceptance became your advantage. Rising again means walking with faith even when the ground beneath you still shakes. You don't wait for certainty anymore. You create momentum in the unknown. The wiser you become, the less you need to see the full path. Trust becomes your map. You walk by conviction, not confirmation. The unshakable no longer run from failure, they dissect it. Every loss becomes a blueprint. Every mistake becomes a mentor. You stop seeing setbacks as proof that you're unworthy. You see them as lessons you were qualified to receive. The world's greatest teachers are disguised as disappointment. When you rise again, your energy changes. You no longer chase validation because you've already met your value. You don't perform to be loved. You lead because you've learned love starts within. External praise used to motivate you. Now, internal peace does. That's real maturity. The wise don't fear endings anymore. They understand that closure isn't something life gives. It's something you create. You rise again by closing doors that no longer lead to peace. The moment you stop reopening old wounds for comfort, your healing accelerates. Rising again means confronting your patterns with honesty. You don't excuse them, you evolve from them. You recognize the behaviors that kept you trapped and replace them with habits that move you forward. Change stops being scary because you've lived through worse, staying stuck. You rise when you stop viewing rest as weakness. The stronger version of you knows recovery is part of growth. The old you worked until burnout. The new you works until balance. The unshakable don't just endure, they sustain. The wise rise differently because they've stopped chasing control. They've learned to move with flow, not force. You can't control everything, but you can control your response. And that's where power hides. The unshakable mind bends without breaking. To rise again, you must stop defining yourself by what broke you. Pain shaped you, but it doesn't name you. You can honor the lesson without carrying the wound. The moment you detach identity from struggle, freedom begins. The unshakable version of you stops needing to prove your strength. You simply live it. You don't explain resilience, you embody it. Others will see your calm and call it cold. They won't realize its control. That's the quiet confidence of those who've already survived hell. Rising again requires choosing peace over chaos, even when chaos is familiar. You no longer crave drama because you've outgrown the addiction to intensity. You understand that peace doesn't mean nothing's happening. It means everything's happening with purpose. Every time you rise, you collect wisdom the weak will never understand. You start recognizing patterns before they repeat. You can see manipulation before it begins, exhaustion before it hits, red flags before they turn into regrets. Wisdom turns your wounds into vision. You rise higher when you stop taking everything personally. You finally understand that people's actions are reflections of their state, not your worth. You stop absorbing their pain as your problem. Detachment becomes your defense, not out of apathy, but out of awareness. Rising again isn't just about healing, it's about leading. Once you've survived the fire, you become a light for others still trapped in it. You start sharing what you've learned, not to be praised, but to help others rise faster. Leadership is born from overcoming, not achieving. You rise when you stop needing recognition. You realize validation is a leash disguised as love. The moment you detach from needing approval, your creativity expands, your peace deepens, and your freedom becomes untouchable. You move in silence because your results echo louder than your explanations ever could. Strength after failure is quiet and methodical. You've stopped rushing to rebuild for appearances. You're building to last now, solid foundations, patient progress. You no longer construct to impress, you build to sustain. The wiser version of you is not chasing quick wins. You're chasing permanence. You rise again when you start honoring boundaries. You no longer overextend yourself to be liked. You say no without guilt and yes without fear. Every boundary is a declaration. My peace is not negotiable. The unshakable don't fear losing people. They fear losing themselves. The wiser you become, the more selective you get. You understand that not everyone deserves access to your energy. You rise by pruning your circle, not out of bitterness but out of balance. You start realizing that solitude often serves you better than company. Every time you rise, you redefine your limits. What used to break you now barely moves you. You've built emotional endurance that most people never develop. You don't need to prove you're strong anymore. Your calm under chaos already says it all. Rising again means mastering patience. You've stopped rushing destiny because you've learned that divine timing isn't delay, it's protection. What's meant for you won't pass you, but what's not meant for you will destroy your peace. Wisdom is knowing which is which. You rise differently when you stop carrying guilt for outgrowing others. The unshakable understand that growth requires separation. You can't take everyone with you, not because they're bad, but because your path requires solitude. Separation is sacred, not selfish. The stronger version of you no longer seeks closure through confrontation. You don't need to prove you're right. You just move right. The energy you once wasted on convincing others now fuels your vision. That's how peace multiplies, through redirection. You rise again when you learn to let silence speak. You no longer rush to fill empty spaces with noise. You've learned that patience reveals what pressure hides. You observe more, react less, and as a result, you move smarter. Every time you rebuild, you rise higher than before because you're no longer starting from scratch. You're starting from experience. The wise know that progress isn't a straight line. It's a spiral, upward. Every return to the beginning is a return with better tools. You rise when you stop asking for easy paths. You've learned that pressure shapes precision. Challenges don't discourage you anymore. They excite you. You recognize resistance as the proof that you're pushing limits. The unshakable welcomes struggle as signal, not setback. Wisdom turns pain into perspective. You stop labeling things as bad or good. You see everything as useful. Every delay trained discipline. Every heartbreak trained humility. Nothing was wasted. It was all instruction. Rising again means not letting fear of the past control faith in the future. You've learned that repetition of pain only happens when lessons are ignored. But now you're alert, aware, and anchored. You no longer fear falling. You fear not growing. You rise when you stop needing external motivation. You've learned that consistency is self-generated. Discipline is no longer punishment, it's devotion. You do the work even when unseen because alignment matters more than applause. The unshakable don't respond to chaos, they outlast it. You've stopped trying to fight every storm and learned to let them pass. You don't lose control when life shifts because you've learned that balance isn't stillness, it's adjustment. Every time you rise, you become more grounded. You stop chasing extremes. You don't need highs to feel alive. Peace becomes your new thrill. You've matured into stability, the quiet kind that doesn't need to be seen to be certain. And finally, when you rise this time, you'll notice. You don't rise with anger, you rise with understanding. You don't rise with ego, you rise with grace. You no longer shout for the world to notice you. You walk with stillness that commands attention without asking, because this time your rise isn't just a comeback, it's a coronation. You've become the storm that once tried to break you. In the end, solitude becomes your greatest teacher. It strips away everything false, every distraction, every dependency, until all that's left is you. And that's where your real foundation begins. When no one believes in your vision, you learn to see it more clearly. When no one stands beside you, you learn to walk taller. Rebuilding yourself alone isn't a story of loss. It's a story of rebirth. It's where the weak version of you fades and the resilient one rises from the ashes. You stop needing validation because you finally understand. Strength isn't something you find in others. It's something you awaken within. So if you're walking alone right now, remember, you're not behind, you're becoming. You're not abandoned, you're being aligned. Every lonely step is preparing you for a life built on truth, not dependency. Because when you have no one, you don't break, you build. And when you rise this time, no one will ever have the power to break you again.